From Unity of Houston, Texas, this is the Awakened Life with Reverend Howard Caesar. Unity is a non-denominational spiritual community providing a positive, practical, and progressive approach to Christianity. Let's join the service in progress now with Reverend Howard Caesar.
So my talk today has a lot to do about fishing. So I don't know how many of you are fishermen and women, but there'll be a few stories around that, and as we trickle on through this talk, and some of them are biblical fishing stories. So you're probably guessing now, what that might be. But I want to start out with a little story that was passed on to me by one of the staff, and it's about an elderly gentleman that decided to take up fishing. He had been retired for a while, and so he thought he would make that a new hobby. And he tells his story of how he proceeded. He said, "So I got my fishing permit a few days ago, and yesterday I went to the Bass Pro Shop to get my fishing gear. And when I was ready to pay for the fishing pole and the tackle, the cashier said," kind of a big guy, "strip down, facing me." Strip down, facing me. And making a mental note to complain to the management about the crazy wacko working in the fishing department, I did exactly what he instructed. And when the hysterical shrieking and alarms finally subsided, I found out that when he said strip down facing me, he was referring to how I should place my credit card in the card reader. I have been asked to shop elsewhere in the future, but they need to make their instructions to seniors like me a little clearer. And I still don't think I look that bad. That's a fish story. You've probably heard the phrase, being in the right place at the right time, right? Perhaps you've been in the right place at the right time a few times. It usually has to do with something good that's happening in your life, or even something that seemingly miraculous occurs. It's kind of like the lady who goes to the grocery store that she's never shopped at, and she goes in and happens to be the 25th person through the checkout line while they're celebrating their 25th anniversary, and she receives a gift for $500 in groceries. Right place at the right time. It's kind of like the person who never, ever buys a lottery ticket and just on a whim goes ahead and buys one on a lark and wins $1 million. It is the person who seems to be in the right place at the right time, and something good happens, big or small, really. So has that happened to you? Yeah. Maybe more than once or twice. It's happened to me, and it's happened actually to Diane and I. Just a quick little example would be, we were living in one home, and Diane felt like, we'd been there like 12 years, and it was time we felt to move. And so she wanted to live on the water. And immediately my mind said, on the water, those are expensive lots. Those go really fast. They're usually big, expensive homes on water, all this. I don't know that can happen. And then all of a sudden I caught myself. I saw those thoughts. And I said, well, there was some really miraculous things that came together for us to have this home. Maybe that can happen again. So I won't cancel that out. I'm going to remain open. So we did start to look, and we did find that there were long lists in developers' plans of people who were already there, long lists who wanted to be on the water. We checked around, and the lots were very expensive, and houses were very expensive. And anyway, we went to one development and actually went lot by lot, and they were all, more than we could handle at the time. And anyway, we just held on to that. It still can happen. And 2 years later, Diane, just on a lark, drove back through this one development that had a couple little lakes on it, and stopped by the builder that we had met once. And he said, "You're here at the right time." The lots, we're finishing out building in this development. We don't have many lots left. We have 5 on the water. They're going for 50% reduction right now. And so she calls me on the phone, I zip out there, and we look at the 5 lots. We picked the one that was closest to a nature preserve, and we bought the home, and Diane and I get to live on the water. And being at the right time, at the right place, at the right time, things happen if you hang on to it and you don't block out, it can't happen. mean, if you do block out, it can't happen. So we have a variety of sayings that come to mind for these kinds of happenings. You know, the person's just lucky. You know, Lady Luck is on their side. Someone up there is looking after you. You must be living right. You must be on the right side of life, you know. And so I ask that, is there a wrong side of life? You know, I would say more than anything, there is simply being out of harmony and out of alignment with certain laws and principles that are at work in this universe that can open you up to your greater good in life. We all have our own unique perceptions about the world and life and ourselves. We all have our systems of thought that we created and form. We have conclusions that we draw about ourselves and life, our answers to questions we might have. We have our opinions, our beliefs, our main thoughts. All of that contributes to creating our unique consciousness and what it is we open up to, what it is that we close down to. Now, the Bible has an interesting word that it refers to again and again. It's an important word, and the word is righteousness. And it must be very important because it is often repeated and referred to throughout the Gospels and really the whole of the Bible. Now, Charles Fillmore was the co-founder of Unity, and he was a man that went deep and studied much, meditated many hours a day, and he was a great metaphysician. And he said in his book, The Revealing Word, he tells us that the word righteousness is a state of harmony established in consciousness through the right use of God-given attributes. So there are God-given attributes that you have been given, and it is being in harmony with those, and it is establishing them within the framework of your consciousness. It is spiritual truth that is basically working in a person's consciousness. It is having a Christ-likeness or a Christ-mindedness. Righteousness is Christ-mindedness. It's expanding your relationship to Source, understanding the principle, engaging in transformation, allowing a renewing of the mind. Let this mind be in you that was in Christ Jesus. All of that aligning with the principles. It's being right on, you know? It's being right on. You know, when they raise their hand and say, right on, brother, and right on, sister, that's what it's about. Righteousness is being right on with truth, so to speak. And so righteousness also means upright, and it's been used in the Bible synonymous with righteous. And sometimes if you look up the meaning of upright, it means honest, it means scrupulous, it means honorable, it means having integrity. Now in school, we were all taught to apply certain principles of math and algebra and geometry and things like that. And when we got the answers correct, you know, it was like feedback. We understood. We were able to apply the principles. We felt good. We scored high. And the same is true of life. There are laws and principles that are spiritual in nature, universal in nature. We are to learn them. We are to begin to apply them, and it'll allow us to score high in terms of peace, love, and joy, prosperity, health, and wholeness, all the dimensions of what we would label as good, multiplying and flowing into our life. And so in Unity, we say that and teach that God does not punish, all right? And when faced with problems, it isn't that God has given you them or brought them upon you. It basically is, we teach the idea of taking personal responsibility, that there may be some principles and spiritual laws that we're out of alignment with, we need to get into alignment with. And there's some things for us to learn, that we are always learning and growing in how it is we can apply certain principles, that problems are actually a part of life. We will always have some problems as a part of life. So it's like Norman Vincent Peale. I like to refer to him. I never forget when I heard him speak a number of times. He spoke here several times. A great minister, wrote the book of The Power of Positive Thinking. He would say, and he had this great raspy voice, he says, if you don't have a problem, you better find one. He'd say, the only people who don't have a problem are those souls who are resting in Forest Lawn. And what he really meant was that problems are a part of life. They're not a way of life, all right? Problems will keep coming as we go through our life as opportunities to apply and learn principles and to strengthen them, like strengthening muscles. And we get to the place where we feel more confident and capable of dealing with and coping with and moving from valley to victory on so many aspects of life that we're confronted with. We become more of an asset to the people around us because we have established in that consciousness that we know there are ways in which to move the energies of life in a creative way forward to make a difference. And so we're always learning. And if problems have become a way of life, instead of a part of life, then we have to look at where it is that we're not being righteousness. We're not applying it, which means right-mindedness, the right way of applying principles and truth. My signature statement that I've had for years, having been on the radio many years, is life is meant to be good, right? I stand by that. Life is meant to be good because the truth principle and teaching is we are all creative beings, okay? And life is meant to be good because we are meant to create it good, to be aligned with the one presence and one power whose nature throughout the universe is good, and is seeking to align us in a way that we can bring forth that good. We're supposed to be bringing heaven on earth. We have to awaken to what that is and how to do it, and that's a process. So we're all here to learn and to integrate the attributes of God, okay? And to do that, we are asked to go fishing. Okay, you with me? So you ready to go fishing? All right. So we do that through a couple of stories. They're biblical, actually, and one of them, there are two stories about fishing that I'm going to touch on. One is from the Gospel of John, chapter 21, and then the other is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 5. And some would say that it's the same story, but actually they're just similar. They actually took place in different locations, if you read the text of each story. And one was at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, and one was at the end, which says that there's a principle here that's very important and was important to get out there at the beginning, and it was important, again, to get out there as he was departing. Very important. And so the first is, well, let me say this, that as you listen to these stories, they're familiar to you, and you can take them very literally. And as I've said before, that there are really 7 levels of understanding to the Bible, from the very surface literal meaning all the way to other levels down into mystical meanings where things are symbolic and represent things that have to do with dynamics going on in use spiritually. So look for that. The first fishing story is found in Luke 5, as I said. It's at the beginning of Jesus' ministry, and he's been teaching to a crowd on the edge of what is Lake Gennesaret. And so the crowd is pressing in on him, and so he backs up against the water and sees a couple of boats that have been emptied there, and there's fishermen washing their nets, and so he steps into the boat, and he finishes speaking to the multitude there, and when he was done, he looks at Peter, who happens to be there, was cleaning nets, and he says, "Peter, go out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." And Simon Peter wasn't all that receptive, if you know the story, because he went into this, spiel about, I was out all night. I didn't catch a thing. We did this. We looked here. We looked there. And it's nothing. But he did respond, and he went again out in his boat. And they filled both boats to the extent that it was sinking. He even had to signal. He was in one boat. He had to signal for the other guys on the shore to come on out. They filled that boat, and it was tremendous. And as a result, Peter, it says, fell on his knees before Jesus. It was like a huge demonstration. There was something that he awakened to that was very powerful. And then Jesus said to him, "Be not afraid. From now on you will catch men." And Peter and the other disciples left everything and followed him. That's the first story. But the most important key that you get in that story is where it is telling Peter, and Peter represents faith, which is a growing dynamic and attribute in all of us, that regardless of what you have just experienced or what you have been through, or regardless of what is or what was, go out into the deep and let down your nets. Okay? Go out into the deep. You with me? All right. Second story is found in the Gospel of John, chapter 21. And we have, it's taking place, we are told, at the Sea of Tiberias. And this is at the end of Jesus' ministry. In fact, the crucifixion and the resurrection has already happened. And this is the third time that Jesus has appeared to anyone following the resurrection. And it states in the passage that he appeared to 7 disciples. And so they were, again, Peter. There was Thomas the doubter. There was James and John, the sons of thunder, which symbolized wisdom and love. And there were 3 others of the disciples. And Peter says to the others, "Hey, I'm going fishing." And the others said, "Hey, we're coming along." And so there were 7 of them. And so they had a little bit bigger boat at least, and went out, and they were told, fished all night in this story as well. They caught nothing. And so when morning came, as we're told in the story, Jesus stood on the shore, but they did not recognize him. And so they're out there a ways, and Jesus is on the shore, and he says, "Have you any food?" And they said, "No." And Jesus says, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they did, and they caught a multitude of fish. And they dragged the nets to shore. And when they got to shore, there was already a fire prepared for the meal. And Jesus said to them, "Come, have breakfast." Key point. Jesus says, "Cast your nets on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." What did he mean? Did he mean right versus the wrong side? Did he mean right versus left? There was a time I was fishing with my father, and we were fishing for bluegills. They were fun to catch, great eating. It was on a lake, and it was just a small boat, and so he was fishing on one side, and I was on the other, and we had like bobbers and night crawlers and so forth, and so all of a sudden he catches one, and he catches another, and then another, and I'm over here, and I check my bait and check, I have the same size bobber, the same size hook, the same bait, everything. I'm not catching a thing. So finally, after several of these, he says, go ahead and throw over on this side of the boat. And I did, and we made a nice catch. Went home and had a nice meal. Seemed like one had to be on the right side of the boat. And sometimes we have to make a necessary change or adjustment or listen to something or someone. It can be a voice outside of ourselves or a voice inside of ourselves that may be directing us to make some kind of a change, a shift toward right-mindedness, righteousness, if you will. Now, it occurred to me that maybe Jesus knew about right and left brain hemisphere stuff, and it just hadn't come to our awareness yet. And he was demonstrating it, That concept of right and left brain thinking was developed in research in the 1960s by the American psychologist Roger Sperry. He got a Nobel Prize in 1981 for it. And in this concept, you're familiar with right-left hemisphere thinking, and just to review, it is said that thinking of the left brain is logical, it's linear, it's analytical, it's sequential, it's usually in words, and it's about the facts. And the right brain thinking is intuitive, it's nonverbal, it's creative, it's artistic, it's holistic, it's imaginative, it's visual, it's feelings, it's of the heart. Now maybe Jesus understood the tendency of the right brain being able to go beyond facts and listen to a still small voice within that we sometimes call the sixth sense or intuition. Either way, whether you think casting to the right side of the boat meant right versus wrong or left versus right, what we do know is the story is about the multiplication of good. Something multiplied and it was good, and Peter threw himself on his knees in exclamation of gratitude of what had been demonstrated. And so all of the teachings of Jesus were about right-mindedness. And he was saying, basically, get beyond the facts. Get beyond the facts of what was and what is, and get to the truth that is found where? In the deep. In the deep, not on the surface. And we can always get stuck in the facts. We can get stuck in the symptoms, the prognosis, the economy, the circumstances, what is, and what have you. And you know, in each story, they were fishing at night and got nothing, which is a symbol of fishing in the darkness of ignorance and misunderstanding, not knowing really the principle and the principles. And so in the daylight, in the morning, things happened, it changed. There was a shift. Now, the thing you need to know and understand is metaphysically, the idea of symbology and things representing things, fish represent ideas, divine ideas, ideas from God, the help. Charles Fillmore, again, he states that fish represent ideas in which there is a greater possibility for increase of good in some form or formlessness in your life, okay? Represent ideas. And he says that in addressing this reference about the right side, and Jesus saying, cast on the right side of the boat, he says that the right side is always on the side of truth versus error, on the side of power versus disempowering, on the side of something positive rather than negative, something life-giving as opposed to life-depleting. Very powerful message there. So whenever you are there, the nets are filled with ideas because you're in touch with this storehouse of wisdom that God is when you connect. So the Christ is always there on the edge, on the water's edge of our lives, directing us, if you will, to go deep, to go to the side of truth versus error, to the side of power versus disempowerment. The fires are already burning so that you can eat of, partake of, digest these ideas that will inspire and lift and promote you forward to a multiplication of a greater good in your life. You following this? Okay. So to be on the right side of life and the right side of truth is to defy the surface facts of what it is you may see or hear that's going on out there. That might not be life-giving, and instead go deeper and create a mental atmosphere where good may come in, and cast your nets there, and know that there is a place to cast your nets. It's on righteousness, right-mindedness, okay? There is always a way. There's always a higher way. There's always a deeper way. There is always a right way, a righteous way, defined by the divine. And it lives in you, it lives in me. The infinite is everywhere. So fish, ideas, anywhere you are, you can cast your net to that multitude of truth that will help to set you free. Wherever you are, God is. You know, another fish story I want to tell you, there was two guys that were out on a fishing trip, and they went to really some rustic place, isolated lake. It was a rustic resort, and they rented a room there, and they had to rent a boat each day and a motor, and they were kind of rookies. And anyway, the first day they went out and they fished and didn't catch anything. And next day they rented again and a little boat and motor and went out and fished and didn't catch anything. The third day they went out and hit a fishing hole and started catching fish. And they were coming in and they were catching and they were happy and they caught their limit. And before leaving, the one guy thought he would figure out how to mark that spot. And so he takes out his magic marker and he leans over the side of the boat and he draws an arrow on the side of the boat where they were catching fish. And the other guy says, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And he answers, "Well, I'm drawing an arrow where the fish are so we can find that spot tomorrow." And the other guy says, "That won't work." And the guy says, "Why not?" The second guy says, "Well, what if we don't get to rent the same boat?" That, my friends, is an example of two people who are fishing in the dark. Okay? It's not where you want to be. But back to the Bible story. We are ourselves like a boat on the sea of life, and we are fishing for answers, inspiration, insight, solutions to what problems that are a part of life. It's not our way of life. A way of life is learning what it is that can help you move beyond them. And so we are to cast our minds like nets into the deep, and always on the side of truth, where the fish are, where the divine ideas are. And they carry a multiplication of power, ideas with great possibility of every of an everywhere present, abundant God of good. And we simply have, all of us, access to a Christ within, a higher self within us that is standing on the shores of our soul. It is directing us to the voice of intuition, that sixth sense, the still small voice that always sides with truth. It asks us, go deeper. Facts change. Facts are temporal. Truth carries permanency. Some years ago, I met a lady at a regional conference. A regional conference, it was 1978 actually, and I was in my second year of ministry, and a regional conference brings all the ministers together, and there was one honored guest. Her name was Mary Wessel, and she was celebrating her 100th birthday. And she was a legend because she had, being 100, that meant she was born in 1878. And she had started basically all the Unity ministries all over Montana. And that was back before cars. And she had little to no money. Her husband had died young. She had 5 children. And somehow she got a free pass on the trains. And she went all over Montana and started churches and study groups. And she was a legend. She got all 5 children somehow through college and educated. And she shared stories in which she had this absolute deep conviction and knowing of having experienced the fact that God is always there, that she had lived herself on the right side of truth, never weakening, always believing. People took her in, a place to stay, feed her, met people, brought together people who were hungry for truth. She said that she could talk on and on for hours on the stories of things that happened that were just miraculous in her life. She had lived it, she had demonstrated. I felt like, and everyone there didn't want her to stop. We felt like we were in the presence of really a holy soul who really, really, at a deep level, knew this truth. And nothing could argue her away from it. She had it so deep within her. She went beyond the externals. She cast her net upon the waters. She was able to catch and partake and digest, and it was the truth of her being. Now, because we've said that problems are a part of life, and they're not a way of life, but they're a part of life, and we all face them. Maybe you're facing one today. Maybe you have a couple, I don't know. But you are to know right now, for that challenge or one that may come tomorrow, because they all come from time to time, to know right now, right here, there is that higher self, that Christ within you, telling you from the shores of your soul to go deep, okay? And to get on the right side of truth and to receive the multiplication of good that God has in store for you. It's there. All you need to do is be willing to cast your nets. This, my friends, is the truth. May it set you free. God bless you all.
Thank you for joining us for today's message. We invite you to be with us again next Sunday. Unity is inclusive, welcoming people of all walks of life in dignity and love. We believe that love, strength, and goodness dwells within you. May we all live in unity with God, humanity, and all of God's creation. And remember, as Reverend Caesar says, life is meant to be good.